All right, welcome back. We're now going to hear from Dr. Jana Price on safety management systems and safety data. Dr. Price.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Hamady, Member Graham, and Member Inman. My presentation will cover issues relating to safety data and safety management systems, or SMS. Specifically, I will describe data sources that could be used to measure mid-air collision risk. I will also discuss who had access to those data and how they were used before the accident. Finally, I will discuss SMS programs at PSA, the FAA Air Traffic Organization, or ATO, and the Army. Within days of the mid-air collision, the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing System, or ASIAS, provided the NTSB with data concerning encounters between helicopters and commercial aircraft near DCA. The initial reports indicated that there had been thousands of so-called close proximity events near DCA in the years before the accident. In the weeks and months that followed, seemingly conflicting estimates of proximity events and near misses were shared by FAA. As a result, the NTSB formed a safety data group with the goals of documenting safety data sources that could have provided indicators of mid-air collision risk before the accident, whether those data were available to stakeholders, and how they were used in the context of SMS safety assurance processes. The data sources were grouped by whether they were comprised of safety occurrence reports or whether they represented objective position data. This slide lists the safety occurrence reporting systems we reviewed. The blocks outlined in yellow were managed by the FAA, including the Aviation Safety Action Program, or ASAP, the Air Traffic Safety Action Program, or ATSAP, Mandatory Occurrence Reports, or MORs, and the Near Mid-Air Collision System, or NEMACS. The Aviation Safety Reporting System, or ASRS, was managed by NASA, and the Army Safety Management Information System, or ASMIS, was managed by the Army. The primary sources of the safety occurrence systems were pilots or air traffic controllers. The systems varied in terms of whether reports were required or voluntary, and whether those who reported voluntarily were de-identified and protected from punishment. There was also variability in which stakeholders had access to the data. Our review of subjective safety occurrence reporting systems found that more than 18 reports per year on average of close calls between airplanes and helicopters near DCA in the 4 years before the accident. When available, we reviewed event descriptions and found reports describing issues like those found in this investigation, including airspace complexity, problems with ATC communications, challenges with combining controller positions, and helicopters flying above recommended altitudes. This slide provides an overview of the position data systems we reviewed. Again, the blocks outlined in yellow were managed by the FAA. The primary sources of data were from aircraft and from surveillance radar. The Flight Operations and Quality Assurance, or FOQA, and the ADSB systems provided information about TCAS resolution advisories and traffic advisories. Systems known as Aviation Risk Identification and Assessment, or ARIA, and Performance Data and Analysis Report System, or PDARS, provided objective information about aircraft proximities using radar and other surveillance data. Data accessibility varied by source, and although the FAA generally had access to all data sources, our review showed evidence of numerous close encounters between airplanes and helicopters near DCA. For example, TCAS resolution advisory data captured by ground-based receivers identified about 15 events per month on average within 10 nautical miles of DCA. The ARIA system found that airplanes and helicopters came within 1 nautical mile laterally and 400 feet vertically, an average of 390 times per month. PDARS found an average of 65.6 instances per month in which airplanes and helicopters came within 1,000 feet separation, and 5.6 instances per month in which they came within 500 feet separation. This heat map shown on this slide comes from PDARS and shows encounters between arriving and departing airplanes and helicopters flying on routes 1 or 4 for the period January 2018 to February 2025. Additional analyses of radar data found that nearly half of all helicopters that transited Route 4 went above altitude limitations at least once along the route. However, we found that neither the FAA nor the Army identified these exceedances before the accident. In all, we found that multiple safety data sources, including occurrence reporting systems and objective position data, showed evidence of mid-air collision risk between airplanes and helicopters near DCA in the years before the accident, but existing systems did not recognize or mitigate the risk. We found that key stakeholders either did not have access to or were not making full use of the data. For example, some of the systems used to analyze radar data for close proximity encounters in this investigation had rarely been used for that purpose before the accident. We found that there was no standard definition to signify when aircraft are too close, which hindered the ability to track their incidents over time or to compare risk levels of different locations. Lastly, although helicopters regularly triggered TCAS resolution advisories for airplanes approaching DCA, we found that helicopter operators were largely unaware of their involvement in these events, and there was no standard mechanism to alert them after such events. Staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA in this area. Next, excuse me. Next, I will discuss the safety management systems that were in place at the FAA, PSA, and the Army at the time of this accident. Multiple investigative groups coordinated to document and evaluate these systems. The United States is a member of the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, which sets standards for SMS. It calls for inclusion of 4 main components: safety policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. Building and sustaining a positive safety culture is also considered foundational to an effective SMS. Both PSA and the FAA developed SMS programs using this model. ICAO requirements do not apply to military aircraft operations. The Army, therefore, had unique regulations and guidance for aviation safety programs. In the remainder of my presentation, I will focus on SMS policies and implementation by the ATO and the Army. At the time of the accident, the FAA had an established SMS for several of its organizations, including the ATO and ATO facilities, such as the DCA Tower. Its SMS policy described the required 4 components of SMS. However, this investigation revealed gaps in ATO's application of safety risk management and safety assurance in comparison to FAA's guidance for other service providers. We found that unlike the FAA SMS guidance for operators, which established requirements for coordinating with relevant external parties to collect and share safety hazard information, the same requirement is not reflected in the ATO SMS guidance, which is limited to bargaining unit representatives and management at FAA air traffic facilities. There was no formal process at DCA for the FAA to share information about helicopter route traffic, TCAS resolution advisories, or potential conflicts with external stakeholders. The formation of a helicopter working group was an example of an informal collaboration among multiple stakeholders designed to promote safety. However, as previously discussed, that group was not able to effect changes such as relocating helicopter Route 4 or adding hotspots to the route chart and spots with potential conflicts. We found that the ATO's application of its SMS did not recognize and mitigate the risk of a mid-air collision at DCA, nor did it effectively coordinate SMS activities with the external stakeholders. As a result, staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA in this area. We also found that ATO management eroded the overall safety culture within ATO by not supporting its workforce, encouraging open communication, identifying and mitigating operational challenges faced by controllers, or fostering a just culture. Interviews with ATO staff indicated that they feared retaliation for raising safety issues, and management often discouraged filing reports because it made the facility look bad. Interviews with current and former DCA tower personnel indicated that morale had been low for years before the accident due to the 2018 facility level downgrade and from the FAA's lack of transparency regarding the metrics used to support that decision. External compliance verifications at DCA between 2022 and 2024 identified non-compliant items, including lack of staff support, poor communication between Potomac Tracon and the DCA tower, and concerns about potential conflicts with helicopter routes, but the ATO failed to recognize these items as indicative of problems at DCA. Finally, DCA tower management personnel were reassigned after the accident, an action that appeared inconsistent with the characteristics of a positive safety culture. As a result, staff has proposed 1 recommendation to the Department of Transportation in this area. With respect to the U.S. Army safety assurance policies, Army safety programs were required to incorporate an occupational hazard reporting and investigation program managed by unit aviation safety officers. Aviation safety concerns could be submitted using operational hazard reports, or OHRs, which required filling out and submitting a form detailing the issue. OHRs submitted to safety officers were to be corrected at the lowest level possible. When FAA facilities or operations were involved, it was sent to the nearest Flight Standards District Office and to the Department of the Army Regional Representative. The Army Safety Management Information System, or ASMIS, was another venue to report safety events, including mishaps and near misses. Mishaps and near misses were broadly defined and could include both aviation and non-aviation safety events and events that occurred on and off duty. Although helicopters had triggered multiple airplane TCAS resolution advisories, and they had been the subject of safety occurrence reports submitted by airplane pilots and controllers, the Army's safety reporting programs did not provide information about those encounters. An Army review of ASMIS found no reports of aviation mishaps or near misses near DCA area, or OHRs referencing the DC helicopter routes or other hazards in the area. Interviews with Army pilots suggested that participation in voluntary reporting programs was limited. Additionally, the Army did not have a program to monitor operational flight data for its helicopters, and as a result, was unaware of routine altitude exceedances and related risks in the DCA terminal area. Such a program could have not only helped identify altitude exceedances, but may have also raised awareness about cumulative errors in the UH-60 Lima's barometric altimeter system. As a result of these findings, staff have proposed 3 recommendations to the U.S. Army in this area. In 2024, the Secretary of the Army issued a directive for the adoption of an Army Safety and Occupational Health Management System, or ASOMS, the Army's first official SMS framework. The elements described in the directive are similar to ICAO SMS components described earlier. The directive required incorporating ASOMs in Army Safety Program regulations by September 2026, and it required Army commands and organizations to be fully compliant by the end of calendar year 2030. Our reviews indicated that progress has been made in incorporating the directive's requirements in policy documents, but ASOM's implementation has been slow, which may stem from several causes, including resource and staffing issues and a distribution of safety management responsibilities across Army organizations. Additionally, we found that the Army lacked a positive safety culture in that its aviation safety system did not have the capacity, resources, or analytical mechanisms to consistently detect, interpret, and act on weak signals of latent hazards. Overall, we found that the Army's process for allocating resources to aviation safety management did not ensure development of a robust SMS for helicopter operations in the Washington, D.C. area. As a result, staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the U.S. Army in this area. This concludes my presentation, and we are now ready to answer your questions.
Thank you. Member Inman.
Thank you. And I'll go back, and Dr. Price, that was really helpful. I think I guess I also want to, because you kind of broke it down a little bit differently, because I pulled some information out of our report. I think it gets to the same place, but we state that performance data analysis and reporting, or PDAR, indicates there were 4,067 encounters between 2018 and 25, in which separation between the helicopters and the fixed-wing aircraft was less than or equal to 1,000 feet. In 348 of those, the separation was less than 500 feet. To what extent did the FAA utilize that data prior to this Midair collision?
Thank you for that question. In the case of PDARs in particular, after this accident was the first time that that system had been used in this fashion to look at the incidents. And in fact, it was a novel use of this system and a very useful one for our investigation. But before this investigation, PDARs had not been used in that fashion.
So I want to go back to the different ways that people can give information. So the way I read it, there's currently the Aviation Safety Action Program, or ASAP, the Air Traffic Safety Action Program, or ATSAP, the Mandatory Occurrence Reports, or MORS, the Near Mid-Air Collision Systems, NMACS, the Aviation Safety Reporting System, ASARS, and the Army Safety Management Information System. Now, collectively, it sounds like pilots and individual controllers were ringing a bell saying something's dangerous, do something. And I'm just curious, is the FAA, were they taking this information? Do they have the capacity? And will they take action on it? That's 3 questions in one. I'm sorry, Dr. Price.
Well, certainly there were numerous different reporting systems that provided information about near misses and events that were happening at DCA before this accident. And the FAA did have access to all of those systems. Our investigation revealed that in general, the reviews of these systems were largely happening kind of on a case-by-case basis and weren't necessarily being looked at in an aggregate fashion. And when we do a look back, of course, we can see that there was a definitive pattern in these data, both with the safety reporting data and with the position data that I mentioned. But as the FAA even noted in our public hearing, that was something that, although they had opportunities to see, they did not detect and mitigate before this accident.
Since that time, have they indicated that they are using this data correctly?
Thank you for reminding me about that question. Since the accident, we do have evidence that the FAA has put some of these data to use. They did a helicopter route analysis in 10 different cities with 16 airports where they used these data to look at and assess risk in airports that had helicopter traffic. And they have made some recommendations as a result of those. One of the things that we remarked on, though, is that they are still not using a standardized approach for looking at that issue, and it's something that we think is necessary to have more of a standard definition of what constitutes a close proximity event, so that there can be a way of comparing one airport to another or looking at trends over time, rather than what is kind of a hodgepodge, if you will, right now, of different ways of measuring this.
So I guess even though he didn't present, Captain, just want to get your attention first. Are you under the impression whenever people file these reports, somebody's actually listening?
I would say generally you file a report and you don't hear anything back.
So what's the purpose of filing a report?
Dr. Price can probably answer this better, but I think it goes into a database.
You're asking what is the purpose of a voluntary report?
I guess I think a lot of people in aviation and a lot of us believe if you're saying something, somebody's looking at it or they're going to take action. Is that a misperception?
Well, no. I think that these safety reporting systems are vital and they serve an important purpose, and we would hope and we would like to believe that when a pilot or a controller files a voluntary safety report, that it will be looked at and will be considered very seriously. And like I said, there is some evidence that there was some case-by-case analyses of reporting, but I think the pattern was missed, and that's where we've proposed recommendations that we think can get at that.
Thank you. So we looked at, for different separations, less than 1 nautical mile lateral, less than 400 feet vertical, and this is something we worked out with FAA and looking at the data, and that gave us the 15,214. Then we looked at less than 600 feet lateral, less than 400 vertical, it gave us 210. And then less than 1,500 feet lateral and less than 200 feet vertical, which gave us 85, right? And
Yes,
so, so the FAA has 10 different sources of data that they're taking in. It's a lot of data that they request. They say they're data-driven. ATO did a top 5 every year, and it says they're data-driven. I would say they are not. I was stunned, absolutely stunned, when Senators Jerry Moran and Duckworth held a closed-door briefing and invited me, invited the Army, invited FAA, and was asking us for an update and asking us questions, and data came up. And I talked about our 15,214 events that we've identified, the 210, the 85, and FAA said, actually, it's 5. My 5. And this isn't the first time. Every time we release data that FAA gives us, they come up with some new thing 2 hours later. And it's just how you want to define it. Now, my guess is, so and you tell me if I'm wrong, you worked with Midair and the FAA on what the definition should be. That was you and them working together to figure that out for our urgent safety recommendation. Then right after we release it, they say, ooh, that makes us look bad, I guess. So they redefine it themselves and decide they should go with 600 feet lateral, 200 feet vertical to come up with 5. So is that correct?
Well, Chairwoman Hamady, I will be honest and say staff was never able to determine the source, the exact source of where that 5 near misses quote came from, in spite of requesting that explicitly. We have some ideas about what it could represent, but to be honest with you, we never got the clear response from FAA about the source of that 5 near misses quote.
Yeah, so I have to tell you, and we're gonna get into this, but Dr. Price, right before our hearing, actually maybe 2 months before, a month and a half before the hearing, I got calls from staff saying, we need your help. I can't get information out of the FAA. We need data, we need help. Can you help us? I weighed in several times. We finally got a response. Then you, Dr. Price, my staff, and Mr. Lauren Groff, you all participated in a phone call with FAA. FAA, you said, this is the information we need. FAA said, okay, you know, put it in writing and we'll get it to you. This is the agreement on what we'll provide. So you put it in writing, and the response was?
In some cases, we were told that our requests were out of scope.
Well, in this specific request, they basically told you no.
In this specific request, we were given some information about near midair collisions, but it didn't match the number 5, so that was the source of the confusion there.
But there was a response from Matt Quebec that I have in writing that says after they agreed to provide you information that they responded and said no.
I think I know what you're referring to, and that was an instance where we had gotten some data from the ASIAS program and we had additional follow-up questions about that. Right. And then as a result of that, we were told that we needed to request that data directly from the Air Traffic Organization, and we followed up and did that. And we were told that the Air Traffic Organization would not duplicate work that had already been done by ASIAS.
Even though part of the request was an additional parameter that you gave them?
Yes, ma'am.
That was not a duplicate?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think many people would understand that the military has unique missions and demands that necessitate deviations from what might be standard or accepted in the commercial world. A proper comprehensive safety management system should not be one of those things. As well documented by our team in their presentation, neither the Army's Safety Management Information System nor their Safety and Occupational Health Management System, individually or combined, comprise an acceptable SMS. I have relentlessly beat the drum of SMS across multiple modes of transportation and organizations since I arrived here at the NTSB. And I truly believe that the military should be no different on this one. The core pillars of SMS are intentionally broad concepts that can be adapted to any operation. In particular, any operator regularly conducting flights in Class B or other congested airspace should have an SMS to properly manage their risk. Our airspace is only as safe as its weakest aircraft, or least safe aircraft or organization. Dr. Price, I got a question or two for you, and maybe somebody else might want to jump in on this too, I don't know. As you mentioned, the Army Safety and Occupational Health Management Systems included some elements of what's similar to an ICAO SMS components. While that is true, is it also true that this program was not a standalone for the Army aviation battalions?
Member Graham, I'd like to ask if Dr. Bramble would address that question.
Yes, you're correct. Aviation was just one application of many of their safety and occupational health management system.
Okay. What other categories of potential hazards or other than aviation safety were included in this program?
There was a wide variety, including tactical, off-duty, automotive, many things unrelated to aviation. There were 14 different areas, I believe.
Well, I'm not going to say that those aren't important. They are important for each unit, but I think what became abundantly clear during the course of this investigation is that the Army aviation safety cannot simply be lumped in with all of those other elements. Is it true that the Army's Safety and Occupational Health Advisory Council which met biannually to review, among other things, workplace safety hazard logs, work-related illness and injuries, civilian case incidents, worker compensation costs, and installation hazard abatement?
Yes.
Yeah. And while these biannual meetings could also cover the covered items directly related to aviation safety, can you share why this does not meet the level of what you would expect to see through like an aviation safety action program or a FOQA program or in the granddaddy of them all, the SIS system?
Sure. I mean, I guess the first difference would be that it's integrated with the command structure and run by the commander. And in the case of an event review committee or something like that, you'd have sort of the safety and QA folks working it independently and advising management. Secondly, those types of committees in commercial aviation tend to have much better data streams, such as FOQA data, LOSA, ASAP, that sort of thing.
Yeah. They had they had an employee reporting system, is that correct?
Yes, they had two different ways that reports could be submitted.
And were there many reports to look at?
No, in the case of occupational hazard reports, there hadn't been any received by the brigade in the last year. And in terms of the Aviation Safety Management Information System near-miss reports, there had been 5 from the 12th Aviation Battalion, 3 wildlife strikes, 1 case for a crankshaft left open on the ground, and 1 off-duty report.
What benefits do you believe the Army would gain from having a standalone, fully resourced SMS program dedicated to aviation safety, which they don't have today?
Well, they would likely have better resources, better focused, aviation-focused analytic capabilities, better data streams, and a better focus on identifying weak signals of latent risks in the system that represent low probability, high consequence accidents, the kinds of complex system failures we're talking about today.
Great, thank you, Dr. Bramble.
Member Inman.
So I want to go to the, actually in the Safety Data Group Chairs Analysis Report, we indicated that the Aviation Risk Identification and Assessment, or the ARIA system, was designed specifically to identify air traffic operations that represent potential safety risks, even if operations are technically deemed compliant. We received testimony, I think, from the FAA Eastern or Safety Group for the Eastern Service Area that ARIA looks at the interaction of aircraft, so how they are moving towards each other, and generates a report. I think we looked at, I believe, 874 of those just between 2022 and 24. To what extent did the ATO use this risk and this data to understand prior to the Midair collision what was going on?
Thank you. The ATO was using ARIA, as you specified. They were reviewing on a case-by-case these 874 events that they referred to as preliminary ARIA reports. The system itself would generate something for them to review when aircraft came within a certain proximity. An algorithm would feed a report to them for review. They had quality assurance teams that would conduct those reviews and assess. And what we found was that their assessments were largely through the lens of compliance. So they were looking to see if there was any kind of lack of compliance, and if there was, they would categorize it, and if not, they would categorize it into another category. Interestingly, within that set of 874, none of them had been identified as being near midair collisions, even though we knew from other sources during that time period that pilots had made those reports. So that was what made us concerned and feel that there needed to be other ways of looking at these data in a systematic way, and we've made proposed recommendations that we think can address that.
It's interesting you use that word. Is in your opinion, or just what you viewed, is the FAA more interested in enforcement or safety?
Well, and with respect to these data, I do think that the ATO in particular was looking at some of these data through more of the compliance lens. The FAA certainly has the capability to look at data in a more holistic way. We do have evidence that, for example, the ASIAS program is doing that and that it is being done. I don't want to say that it's not being done, but in this instance, with these particular types of data, we did feel like they weren't looking at it in kind of an aggregate or big picture risk focus, but rather a compliance-based way.
And I think that's a nice way of saying it probably. But I would offer again the same thing. Are we going to 5 years from now be saying we're seeing something that the data was there again? Because it seems like every 2 or 3 years, it's almost whack-a-mole. We continually go back and say, oh, they're looking at it, they're trying, and then we just come back and we have another incident.
Well, one of the recommendations that staff has proposed has to do with asking FAA to establish a standard measure of close proximity, making that public, and then creating a database so that all of the stakeholders can have access to those data so that people can conduct analyses and be aware of these types of events.
So is it the public's responsibility or is it FAA's?
Well, we would certainly expect FAA to analyze those data, but because those data are available and can be public, there are a lot of different stakeholders who are interested in this, and having that data available to a wide range of people is one way to ensure that it can be, there can be transparency and can be looked at.
Let me ask, I guess, a different way. I'm kind of curious because we can go through this report and a lot of different things. If you could change one thing at the FAA today and make everyone safer, what would you do? I'm not trying to lead you into a question, Dr. Price. I'm just interested in your opinion.
Well, sir, I think everyone at this table would have an idea of what they would want to do. I am a safety data person, so you know, I would like to see better sharing of safety data information, better analysis of safety data information, and the recommendations that our group has proposed in this area, we hope can move forward in that, because then it can allow for better foresight and better prediction of risk in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about sharing of data, which you mentioned with external stakeholders. Can you talk about that a little bit? First, how does NTSB get its data?
Chairwoman Tomini, there's a variety of different ways we get data. We own some data. We are the shepherds or the stewards of some aviation data. We access publicly available data. We can request from FAA lots of different kinds of data. And there are some sources of data that are proprietary. For example, as I mentioned, the ASAP and ASAP voluntary reporting systems and the FOQA systems that are part of the ASIAS program that are proprietary, and we have a special agreement memorandum of understanding with FAA, and there are certain situations where we may request those data.
Some data systems that FAA have, we still pay for.
That is correct. That is correct.
Instead of the sharing of data. So how about industry? How does industry get, say the commercial airlines, how would PSA get information from FAA?
Well, PSA, as many airlines, are members of the ASIAS program, which is a collaboration between industry well, it's a collaboration among many stakeholder groups that's managed by a third party that brings information together and allows them access to it. So that's one way that PSA and many operators get safety data.
Some of the criticism of that, though, is that it's outdated and old by the time they get it.
Well, we were told in this investigation that there were lags between when they were contributing data and when they could see that data. And so,
How
yes,
long?
Sometimes 3 months.
How about the Army? Do they get the data?
We asked Army about their use of FAA data. Before the accident, they did not routinely request data from FAA. In the public hearing, they said that they were interested in starting that practice, and we queried them again recently, and we do know that they have made some outreach efforts to FAA, we know that there has been some conversation about them becoming participants in the ASIAS program. I think there have been some challenges with that. And again, I think some of the recommendations that staff is proposing, we hope will help to foster that type of sharing.
Did the FAA ever give the Army data?
To the best of my knowledge, no, they did not.
Right. We'll get to, well, what are the biggest barriers, I guess, to that information sharing?
Well, I think that some of the barriers that we identified was that there wasn't a common language of sharing some of this information. So there wasn't kind of a common language. We also just found that some parties, as we mentioned, as we just alluded to, didn't have access to some of the data sources, and in some cases weren't even aware of it. And I think another barrier that we saw was that even though there was this kind of ongoing stream of reports coming in, that those individual reports, those NEMAC reports, those ASAP, ASAP reports, weren't leading to the questions and looking at things in a bigger scale, looking at kind of is this a system approach? And I feel like that linkage was also kind of missing.
Okay, one more question on the data side. Can I ask Mr. Groff a question?
Certainly.
Hey, Lauren. You and I have talked about this, that there are some concerns with an over-reliance on AI by FAA, that there are some challenges there, that if that they've got to be careful on the use of AI to pick up trends to make sure it doesn't discount some reports. Can you just talk about some potential benefits you could get from the use of AI to help them identify trends, but then also some potential downsides?
Sure, thank you for that. There was some discussion even in the investigative hearing on use of AI. The term is widely used to include a lot of kind of algorithmic computer process. And so what is it that you're actually talking about when someone says AI as a question? And I think in this case, it is being used. FAA is using it in some cases when they have large volumes of pilot reports to make sense of them, categorize them, and group them, and it directs attention there. I think one of the things, even the ARIA system could be considered to be AI. I think what we saw here was in some cases, was not really understanding what was represented. So there really does need to be a human understanding of what all of these things mean together. So if you're looking to a computer system to give you the answer and kick out the answer, I think that would be problematic if it would be that type of an application. It really does need a human understanding and review to trust what they're getting out of it. So it may be that if there's any loss of true understanding of what those events mean, that could be problematic. So pluses and minuses.
Yep, thank you. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just amazed about the amount of data the FAA Air Traffic Control Organization had, and it sure doesn't seem like they were doing anything with it. Was the FAA aware, or had they been made aware of the risk of a mid-air collision near DCA along Route 4 and the approach path to runway 33 prior to the accident?
Member Graham, I think the answer to that is yes. There were safety reports, and there was also the work of the helicopter working group that had raised these issues as a concern.
Yeah, I agree. It was there. I think it was there. People were telling them it was there. One of the things that struck me as I read through the multitude of data the FAA had available to them was now nearly every subjective data reporting mechanism was inconsistent with the objective data source events surrounding DCA. For example, I want to draw attention to the discrepancy between ATSAP program for air traffic controllers and the ASAP program for pilots. Over a nearly 4-year period from February 2020 through October 2024, more than 16,000 ASAP reports were filled or were filed related to DCA. That's from the pilots, including 85 specifically concerning close calls between airplanes and helicopters. Yet, somehow over nearly a 12-year period, 3 times as long, from January 2011 through August 2023, only 520 ADSAP reports were filed related to DCA. Of those, just 26 contain information on close calls between airplanes and helicopters. To put those numbers in perspective, pilots at DCA were filing nearly 18 ASAP reports annually regarding close calls between airplanes and helicopters, and controllers at a DCA were only filing 2 per year. I'm going to ask Mr. Soper this. With regard to the discrepancy between ASAP and ADSAP programs uncovered during this investigation, what do you believe is the reason for air traffic controllers identifying significantly fewer close calls than the pilots?
Thank you for the question. So in air traffic control, there is a little bit of a difference, so that metric could be a little deceiving, and that's because in air traffic, we also have, you've heard mentioned a couple of times, mandatory occurrence reports, which are requirements for air traffic control to submit, losses of separation would be one of those things. Near mid-air collisions would be one of those things. Runway incursions would be one of those things. The list goes on. So we looked at, I believe it was 10 years, and Jana, please correct me if I'm wrong, like 10 years worth of data approximately, and they had 170,000 plus mandatory occurrence reports at DCA that were reported by air traffic control. So for air traffic controllers, they may not file an ADSAP based on a report, especially if they've already reported it via mandatory occurrence report, because they feel they've met a reporting requirement and they don't take the time to go to actually do an ADSAP on top of it.
Is it difficult to do an ADSAP report?
No, I would say it's not difficult to do one. They make
Is there
it
a
very
reluctance?
Easy. No, well, from our investigation here at DCA, none of them displayed a reluctance or said that they had a reluctance. They felt free to file, and they did. They did file reports.
Was there any fear of retaliation for reporting in any way close calls?
Not according to our interviews. They didn't feel a fear of retaliation for reporting in an ADSAP.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's all I have right now. I'll wait for the next round.
Member Inman?
I think I've done with my questions, and so can I pass until we get to the last round? Of course. Okay, because I do have a couple of last minute things.
Dr. Bramble? Dr. James Reason talks about 5 components of a positive safety culture. Reporting culture, just culture, flexible culture, learning culture, informed culture. Do you believe the FAA had a reporting culture? And let me, just for everybody watching, a reporting culture is a culture where staff feels, this is per Dr. James Reason, feels safe and confident reporting safety concerns, near misses, and errors without fear of blame.
I should probably defer this question to Dr. Wilson.
So in some regards, we believe that at the facility level, there was a reporting culture. Controllers did indicate that they felt comfortable submitting ATSAP reports, and management also said that they had an open door policy, and controllers said that they felt comfortable going to their managers if they had a safety concern. at a more global level at the ATO, we do not believe that there was a reporting culture. As was mentioned in Dr. Price's presentation, some staff did feel that there would be retaliation for reporting safety concerns. We had multiple people who wanted to share information with us but didn't feel comfortable until they were closer to retirement because they were afraid of retaliation. We obviously had the issue at the public hearing, our investigative hearing, where we felt like management might have been influencing the testimony of some of our witnesses. So in some aspects, yes, and some aspects, no.
In fact, we couldn't get some people absolutely refused to testify or even be interviewed on the record. One person in particular went to a friend of mine at the FAA to call me to ask if he could meet with me because he wasn't comfortable talking to anybody else. It's inappropriate for me because I'm not an investigator, but I was able to connect through that intermediary. I don't even know the person's name who came forward, but with Mr. Soper and Miss Lewis, because they were afraid. People who testified, they were afraid. I mean, and I'll ask Mr. Soper if you can comment on that. I mean, numerous times people indicated they were afraid of retaliation.
We did have several. Now, just wanted to differentiate, not people that were actually at the facility in this case, but yes, we had, I had at least 3 that I felt were key concern personnel that absolutely refused to testify.
Including all our witnesses that were concerned.
Yes, the witnesses that we did get were very concerned.
How about the reporting culture at the Army?
It was not robustly implemented at the unit level.
How about just culture? Just culture in ATO. Just culture means an atmosphere of trust where people are encouraged to report essential safety-related information, but clear lines are drawn between acceptable and unacceptable behavior.
Again, I think at the facility level, for controllers, they were encouraged to report ATSEP reports, but we do know that following this event, managers were reassigned. As Dr. Price mentioned in her presentation, following some mandatory report occurrences that occurred, they were told not to report them because it might make the facility look bad. Mm-hmm. And then again, just those hesitant to talk to us, I think goes to show that there was not the just culture.
Just culture at the Army.
We did not find that to be a problem at the unit level in the Army.
Flexible culture. Do you mind if I finish the 5? Yeah, flexible culture. Culture that can adapt effectively to changing demands and when necessary shift from normal hierarchies to a structure that relies on expertise. ATO.
I think we found that the ATO did not adapt to recommendations, concerns over near midair collisions in the DCA area.
Flexible culture, Army.
I think that the safety assurance system was not nimble enough to specifically look at some of the risks in the DC airspace.
Informed culture, an organization that collects and analyzes relevant data and actively disseminates safety information to the workforce. ATO.
Again, as Dr. Price mentioned, with the safety assurance process, we definitely found failures with that. ATO failing to share information with parties that were involved in some of these occurrences, and also, on a broader sense, failing to identify the midair collision risk.
Army.
This was definitely a weakness. They lacked information about the frequency of near midair collisions between their helicopters and other aircraft in the airspace, and they were unaware of the prevalence of maximum altitude exceedances among their helicopters.
And they could have gotten through flight data monitoring.
Correct.
Informed culture, an organization that collects and, wait, did I do that one? Learning culture. An organization capable of learning from its mistakes, analyzing data, and making necessary improvements, ensuring staff understand SMS. ATO.
Again, numerous times The helicopter working group brought recommendations to the ATO, which were not acted upon, and those were ignored. We also had external compliance verification findings over multiple years that the ATO did not learn from.
Army.
I think they might have if they had been aware, but I think because they were not aware of these risks, they did not learn about them.
Thank you. Member Graham.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the FAA SMS. Just amazing. I think we found that there were some serious issues with their SMS, and we'll talk about those now, but it's the height of hypocrisy when a regulator expects operators it regulates to follow prescribed SMS regulations to the detail, but can't seem to come even remotely close to following its own, in this case, their own SMS. Let's start with safety risk management, which is the second pillar of an SMS. What did the SRM, safety risk management, entail at ATO?
The ATO did have safety risk management policies in place that we did find on several occasions. It was followed, particularly at the facility. Following the GAO noise study, there was a SRMP that was conducted in March of 2023, which revised some of the altitudes along the helicopter routes. However, we did also find that SRM wasn't typically used in response to issues identified through that were identified through the safety assurance process.
So they weren't doing them very often, were they?
It appeared to be dependent upon the issue.
Hit or miss, yeah. I've been part of one of those processes in my prior life, so. And let's talk about safety assurance. When safety assurance activities identify deficiencies, what actions should be taken according to the ATO's SMS?
I could take that.
Okay, thank you.
Safety risk management and safety assurance are considered sort of complementary activities. So safety assurance is really just monitoring safety performance indicators to ensure that the safety risk management is working as intended. So it would be sort of a feedback then if the safety assurance identifies performance that doesn't match the SRM, that it would feed back into the safety risk management process to reevaluate whether there was maybe hazards or risks that weren't properly assessed or controlled.
Didn't seem like that was happening very often. Yeah. Finally, let's talk about the fourth pillar at SMS, and I could talk about all the pillars, but we don't have enough time today. Safety promotion, what was that supposed to entail at the ATO?
So safety promotion would be focused on SMS training for personnel, disseminating safety lessons learned, and these actions would all foster a safety culture at the ATO.
We definitely saw some issues there, didn't we?
We did. We learned in the hearing that Mr. Fuller stated that there was no SMS training for ATO personnel. It was the expectation that management at the facility would have access to the manual and therefore be familiar with SMS because of that.
That's at the foundation. Every employee is the safety officer. They need to be trained on what their responsibilities are and their roles are. I don't get it. I know this is asking your opinion, but objectively in our review of ATO's safety culture, did we find any evidence that it was a positive safety culture without actual or fear of retribution for employees who voluntarily reported safety concerns?
We don't have evidence that anybody who reported a safety concern via ATSAP faced any retaliation. But again, we did have several people who talked to us who said that they faced retaliation for raising safety concerns at the ATO.
So would it be fair to say that their SMS was nice on paper, but maybe not so nice in reality?
They did have an SMS manual, so they did have it documented. However, we did identify a number of deficiencies. And that is why we have a recommendation for their SMS to be evaluated.
And in your judgment, had the ATO followed their prescribed SMS with regard to what they knew about the risk around DCA before this accident, would that process have led them to enact mitigations that could have prevented this accident?
We'd like to believe that a properly implemented SMS would have identified this.
I agree with that. Thank you.
Good questions. Member Inman.
I guess this may be our last round. Okay, so first off, the conversation was good. I appreciate it, Member Graham, Chairman. It reminds me of something actually of someone who just passed away. It was a great comment. When culture clashes with policy, culture always wins. That was Fred Smith at FedEx. I think it's a very apt quote. So I've done something every board meeting since I've been on the board. So I'm actually going to ask Deputy Managing Director Brian Curtis, I think it's important. Can you tell us how many current investigations we have ongoing or open at the NTSB?
Yes, currently across aggregate of all the modal offices, there are 807 open investigations.
Okay. And Mr. LeBaron, how many do we have open in aviation alone?
So presently we're at about 711. And to put that in perspective, we do about 1,200 a year.
Yeah. I only bring that up in that it's probably to be the last time that I'll have a little bit of opportunity to before Chair will do a closing statement, but I know this is tough on everyone, but there's a lot of other people that these investigators have to work and try to help. And I know whenever I was watching the board meetings, I started realizing quickly not everyone gets the full board meeting, but there's still a lot of important work that's being done by our investigators and a lot of people, and especially victims' families that are out there hoping for answers. So I'm appreciative to the staff for that. It just helps us to remind it a little bit. And it also is, it's a reminder for me. I launched on 91 aviation fatalities last year. I did 13 family briefings, and I am tired of doing them. And I'm sorry for you. Because the pages of these reports are written in your family members' blood. So with that, again, I'm sorry that we have to be here. I know we'll get into the final cause and a lot of things shortly, but I hope this is helpful in what we've been doing and what we will do after tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. I do have a question, though. Mr. McKinney and Dr. Bramble, maybe you as well. How would you describe your work and the willingness, your work with the Army throughout the investigation and their responsiveness to NTSB requests?
Generally, the cooperation was excellent. We received some delays later in the process, but by and large, they were pretty responsive.
The Army was excellent and responsive to work with, especially through the brigade. We had no problems getting the information we requested, and they rapidly provided us assets such as aircraft to do flight tests. So it was a good experience, good working relationship with the Army at the tab level.
Mr. Banning, would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I see Colonel Easter and Colonel Yeager, I believe, in the audience, and then we also worked with Colonel Parker. I thought it was an excellent working relationship. They provided us what we needed. I do want to thank Secretary Driscoll. We speak often. He was very responsive when we needed assistance, and I really appreciate that. Mr. Soper, maybe others who might want to, well, let's start with Bryce. Mr. Banning, how would you describe your work with the FAA throughout the investigation and their responsiveness to NTSB requests made of the ATO?
I think we are grateful for the FAA's role. We're grateful. They did provide us a tremendous amount of data. We're grateful for their cooperation. However, there were some struggles that have already been stated. It is difficult when conducting an investigation to be told what is within the scope of your investigation. So
Them telling us what is in and out of scope.
Yeah, that was problematic. But we do appreciate their role, and they did provide us a tremendous amount of data.
Absolutely, we appreciate their role. However, there were a lot of data and information challenges and concerns on retaliation and everything else. I will say, I think it's very interesting that for all the data we requested and much of what we did not receive, you received a phone call on Friday, or emails from FAA asking, 2 different emails, I believe, did we have everything we needed and did we get all of our data requests answered on Friday? Friday. That's ridiculous. 1 year later, 6 months of asking, actually, I think you all asked me to start weighing in back in May. Some of those questions never answered. And yet Friday, they ask. You're too late. We already figured it out ourselves. Okay, well, any other questions nope? All right, well, we're gonna take a 15-minute break. We'll be back, I think 15 minutes. Yeah, 4 o'clock. All right. We are back in session. Mr. Curtis, will you please read the proposed findings?
Certainly, Chair. As a result of the investigation, staff proposes the following 71 new findings. Number one, the pilots of Flight 5342 were certificated and qualified in accordance with federal regulations. Number two, the pilots of Flight 5342 were medically qualified for duty, and available evidence does not indicate that they were impaired by effects of medical conditions or substances at the time of the accident. Number three, review of the Flight 5342 pilot's time since waking and sleep opportunities in the days before the accident indicated that the pilots were unlikely to have been experiencing fatigue. Number four, the pilot, instructor pilot, and crew chief on board PAT-25 were qualified and current in their positions as designated by the unit commander in accordance with Army regulations. Number five, the pilot, instructor pilot, and crew chief of PAT-25 were medically qualified for duty, and available evidence does not indicate that they were impaired by effects of medical conditions or substances at the time of the accident. Number six, review of the 3 PAT-25 crew members' time since waking and sleep opportunities in the days before the accident indicated that the crew were unlikely to have been experiencing fatigue. Number seven, the airplane was properly certificated, equipped, and maintained in accordance with 14 CFR Part 121. The airplane operated within its weight and balance limitations throughout the flight. Examination of the airplane.
Sorry, can you pause for a second?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, we're back to 7 and had flipped to 8. Go ahead. You're fine. Start at 7 and just the video, the screen was off.
Okay, I'm sorry. Number 7, the airplane was properly certificated, equipped, and maintained in accordance with 14 CFR Part 121. The airplane was operated within its weight and balance limitations throughout the flight. Examination of the airplane revealed damage consistent with an in-flight collision and subsequent impact with water, and there was no evidence of any structural, system, or power plant failures or anomalies. Review of surveillance videos indicated that the airplane's wing navigation, landing taxi, and anti-collision strobe lights were operating at the time of the collision. Number 8, the helicopter was properly certificated, equipped, and maintained in accordance with U.S. Army regulations. Review of helicopter maintenance records did not reveal any open discrepancies or anomalous trends that contributed to the accident. The helicopter was operated within its weight and balance limitations throughout the flight. Examination of the helicopter revealed damage consistent with an in-flight collision and subsequent water impact. There was no indication of any structural, main or tail rotor system, flight control system, or power plant failures or anomalies. Review of surveillance videos indicated that the helicopter's right and tail position lights, the landing light, as well as both upper and lower anti-collision lights were operating at the time of the collision. Number 9, the operations supervisor and 4 controllers who were working in the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport Air Traffic Control Tower cab at the time of the accident were properly certified, qualified in accordance with federal regulations and facility directives, and current. Number 10, although the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport Air Traffic Control Tower facility was not staffed to its target level at the time of the accident, the number of staff in the tower at the time of the accident was adequate and in accordance with Federal Aviation Administration directives. Number 11, The decision to combine the helicopter control and local control positions was not the result of insufficient staffing, and personnel were available to staff the helicopter control and local control positions separately had the operations supervisor chosen to do so. Number 12, the local control controller, assistant local controller, and operations supervisor were medically qualified for duty, and available evidence does not indicate that they were impaired by effects of medical conditions at the time of the accident. Number 13, review of the local control and assistant local control controllers and operations supervisors' time since waking and sleep opportunities in the days before the accident indicated that the controllers, including the OS, were unlikely to have been experiencing fatigue. Number 14, visual meteorological conditions prevailed in the area at the time of the accident. A review of observations recorded throughout the night of the accident revealed no evidence of any local atmospheric pressure anomalies that would have impacted barometric altimeter readings. Number 15, keeping the helicopter control and local control positions continuously combined on the night of the accident increased the local controller's workload and negatively impacted his performance and situation awareness. Number 16, had the helicopter and local control positions been staffed separately, PAT 25 might have received a more timely and effective traffic advisory. Number 17, due to extended time on position at the time of the collision, the operations supervisor was likely experiencing reduced alertness and vigilance, which decreased his awareness of the operational environment and reduced his ability to proactively assess the risks posed by the traffic and environmental conditions at the time of the accident. Number 18, the lack of mandatory relief periods for supervisory air traffic control personnel is contrary to human factors research that shows clear performance deterioration in situations of prolonged time on task. Number 19, although the local control controller provided an initial traffic advisory to the crew of PAT 25 in accordance with Federal Aviation Administration Order 7110.65, he did not provide a corresponding advisory to the crew of Flight 5342 regarding PAT 25's location and intention, which could have increased situation awareness for the crew of Flight 5342. Number 20, if the LC controller had issued a standard safety alert to the flight crews of either aircraft as prescribed in FAA